I worked for a lot of different teams, and it was kind of a different path as to like how I got there. And I think, everyone kind of has a unique story, but I think you kind of create your own path. And I think it's cool to hear how everyone got their start and, how they ended up where they are now.
Awesome. Thank you. For those less familiar with the role of corporate partnerships and more specifically partnership activation, can you explain what your group does?
Yeah, I think activation is either a word people just like have no idea what that means or just have their own definition of what that means. And I think it's a department that people kind of, I mean, maybe Steve, you can agree, but like they have no idea what activation does. So I'll try my best to explain it. So I think I'll start back, like we'll take a step back and I'll talk about corporate sales a little bit. So corporate partnership sales in sports, we have a sales team of 5 right now. And, currently they go out into the marketplace looking for different partners. So that can range from local restaurants, like Legal Seafood, all the way to like national partners like American Express. It ranges completely. So I wouldn't say, it's like they kind of go after a certain type of brand or category. Because essentially we can partner with like little companies and big ones as well. And it just depends on what we need in those certain categories. So they go out, they try and sell, they try and find partners who want to advertise with us. Eventually what we come to is like an agreement of all their assets. So from there, my activation team, I'll assign a representative or 2 to it, and they'll work on the partnership day to day. Their contacts there 24/7, basically. They probably don't want me to have you tell them that, but we're pretty much accessible 24 hours a day. And I think, Steve, you can probably confirm that's how it always ends up being when you're on the activation side.
Oh, yeah.
So from there, we pretty much create a timeline of everything that they're going to have throughout the season. So that's specs, that's deadlines, that's sweepstakes for, partners who want to be on our digital side. Then we have community programs, which we have an entire team that's dedicated to that. It's just completely, it could be so different for every partner, which I think is what appeals to most people who are in activation. It's not the same transactional thing you're doing day to day. Like every day is new. One day you could be out doing a community program with one of your partners. The next day you're hosting a player dinner with your partners. It just completely ranges. And I think that's what the cool thing is about it. You're never going to be bored doing activation because you're A, constantly busy, or you're B, just catching up on emails, and you're just trying to organize, even though you'll never be caught up on anything because there's always so much happening in a good way. So we pretty much, I think we're definitely we're part of the pre-sales process from a standpoint of like, is this inventory we should be selling, or is this something you think that would be fit right with the prospect? But we're definitely a post-sales group where we just pretty much take over and execute all of their marketing assets A to Z. So, we're also there just to kind of like make sure their partnership is getting the best value that they have.
Awesome. You touched on this a little bit, but could you talk about the skills that partnership activation staff would need to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I do like about activation is I think like currently the people in my department, all 5 different types of personalities, all different strengths and weaknesses. But I think at the end of the day, it's just being that team player and wanting to just like learn and do well. That just kind of, I think, attracts me to most candidates in general, because at the end of the day, like we're a team, and even if we have individuals working on accounts, we'll all step up and work on things together. Sometimes it's an entire team effort. Sometimes you're pulled into a different account. But I think that's what I think is so helpful when you and if you don't have that account, you end up learning from it, which I think is cool, because then at some point you may be taking over that account, and it's good to kind of learn what they're doing, even though you don't know what their day-to-day is like necessarily. But I just think that willingness to learn, because I think you can learn activation without, necessarily like having certain, like, oh, well, if you don't have that background, you're not going to be qualified. I think like people have learned like from the start with it, and you just grow with it. And if you realize that kind of like fits your personality, that fits your skill set, it can all come together, because there's no like, well, if you don't have XYZ, like, as long as you have that attitude that you want to learn and grow professionally and personally, I think that's all teachable, and you can either fall in love with it, or it's like a stepping stone into like whatever that next step in your career is.
Yeah, for sure. I would echo the relationship steward and certainly
Yes.
being organized and a team player. Those things were quite
Right.
key in my career. So we serve two different audiences of students. Number one would be our campus-based students, or our younger online students. Those generally, 18 to 24 years old, kind of in the coming to age experience,
Yep.
who might be looking for internships or entry-level positions. For those that have become interns or those entry-level roles, what has separated those folks for you? What
Yeah.
makes them successful?
What you'll find is, I think so many people within like at least sports organizations that I've worked for, like, were interns at that organization at some point. I was an intern at the Celtics. Steve was an intern at the Celtics. Like, everything goes back to like the fact that you proved yourself as an intern, because it's almost, that's your job interview, in my opinion. If that's a place you want to work there in the future, your entire internship is a job interview, because everything is taken into account. So you may think you're doing something little, but everyone's taking notes, and whether you realize it or not, you're being evaluated day to day. So if your attitude is kind of bad, or you're kind of lazy one day, like, the problem is everyone's going to notice, and that may be something that affects whether you end up working there. But if you're proactive every day, which I think is like the key, like, if you're not doing anything, like, ask somebody like, hey, can I help out with anything? Like, is there an event I can go to? Is there something that I can work on that would help you or me, like, just understand the department better? Just raising your hand and just being that eager. Even if there's not a position open at the end of the internship for that person, I personally, like, and I can say like other people, like, I'll help find a job, or like, help put a resume through, or just like be a reference, because it's never going to always, timing doesn't always work out where like, oh, there happens to be a position after your internship, but people appreciate good interns, and will always kind of, I think they always take care of them the best they can post internship if they do an amazing job. I can say like, after certain interns have been here, I would be like, we need to find a place for them here. Or I'm like, you know what? I know someone that I used to work with at another sports team, there's an opening there. Like, do you want me to submit your resume? So just realize like your entire internship is vital. I think like that's how I landed my first job after college. Like, I emailed someone in the ticketing department, and they're like, hey, we have an opening at the inside sales, and you kind of just keep your relationships going from there. And you don't necessarily, like, you may not have the best relationship, but if you know that you proved yourself, and like, people will remember that for sure. Like, everyone always remembers the good interns, like, you can name them off. So I think just being aware of that, and just knowing like, just be on it and be ready, and I think it'll all work out.
Awesome. And just a reminder to folks that have joined, feel free to use the box in the top right to ask any questions of Vicky that you have. We'll ask a few more of the prepared ones, and then jump to any attendee and student questions. So Vicky, the other population that we serve are online students that are generally adults. They have a career, they may be starting a young family, or have an established family. Those folks may not have previous sports experience, but have established careers in some sort of area. So For those that are looking to switch industries and move into sports, what advice would you have for them, and what do you think is vital for them to know about what's different in the sports industry?
I think in general, I don't think people should shy away from trying to get into sports if they don't necessarily have the direct sports experience right away. I think all experience is important, and I think if you have the right attitude and you're in a position where you can make that transition into sports, then I think it's all doable. I think there's a lot of people with sports experience that may not be right for certain positions. So I think that shouldn't steer you away. But I will say networking, this doesn't just go for the online students, but I think networking is a big deal, because just being out in the community and meeting people is kind of how you develop those relationships into, hey, you know what, like, I think you'd be great at this, we might have a role open in the community department that you might be interested in. I think people don't realize how well, or how small, I guess, like, these communities are. Like, Boston may seem big, but it's actually, like, in my opinion, super small. Like, everyone knows everyone, and then by then you're like, oh, I met that person, I knew that person. Like, I came back to the Celtics and I was like, wait, I know everyone. Like, I didn't realize like how small it is. But just networking and meeting as many people as you can, and that just doesn't help you with jobs in general. I think, like, if you do want to get into ticket sales or corporate sponsorships, just making those connections will just help you in your individual role. And that person then knows somebody who may know somebody, and it just ends up being like full circle. Everyone kind of, oh, that person worked with that person, and then you can end up making those relationships. But I just think getting out there and just going to as many networking events, or just, finding opportunities like that, and just taking advantage of it, because, I know, like, it's tough to just try and, like, find time, but I do think it just takes that one person you do meet at an event that can either, sway you one way, or, like, help you understand something where maybe you decide your career path can change, or just give you another perspective on a job you may be interested in. And, I think just the sports and entertainment industry is just very, like, the minute you know one person, you kind of end up knowing everyone. So you just kind of have to get out there and then show that you're a person who wants to learn, or you want to be part of the industry, or just, like, even getting coffee with someone and just kind of getting their background on things. Like, little things like that make a difference. And, as long as you're accommodating and you just want to, like, make sure they realize that you just want to learn more, and then something always ends up opening up, because that's just how it is. I don't think, like, things necessarily open up when you're ready, but I think eventually there's opportunities out there that will come to you if you do the right things, and just, like, kind of meeting the right people, and just making, just, like, make yourself known.
Awesome. Question from the audience. Thank you for whoever submitted this. Going back to internships. So when you're looking at resumes for interns, what type of experience is interesting for you? What are you hoping to see in a resume
for an internship? I think it's cool when they become a really big part of, like, their college or university's community, whether that's, like, volunteering, or just finding little ways to just take advantage of your college experience, because that's just taking advantage of the entire, like, your entire experience, whether that's, being a part of just volunteer groups, or, I know, like, a lot of fraternities and sororities have, things that they're associated with. But I think personally, if you don't take advantage of your university's, what they're, like, handing to you, basically, then, that just goes back to networking too, because during those opportunities, you're going to meet people. So I like people being ingrained in that, because that means they're ingrained in part of their community, and they're, like, wanting to learn more, and they're utilizing their free time to learn and just, like, meet people. And I think that's what's important, at least in an activation standpoint, is you're going to be talking to people all day. And if you don't kind of have that if you don't have that, like, drive or desire to want to do that, then that's probably not the best position for you, because you're just, a big part of our job is relationship management, and you're going to be, with clients all the time, and it may not always be like the best conversations, but you just kind of have to know and be ready for anything. And I do specifically like when, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, you need another internship in sports to get this opportunity. As long as I see that person taking advantage of the fact that they're at the university, and, if you're at SNHU and I'm sure there's a million events and things that you could be a part of, and little clubs and groups within that, I think that shows a lot.
Awesome. And just my own caveat in case we have any online students on the line, if you don't know, we do have online-based student clubs and organizations, so please don't look at any of that feedback as campus only. There are lots of ways to get involved, even if you have a job and a family and other things going on that campus students may not. So certainly good ways to get involved in both formats. Vicky, going back to you individually, what is one thing that you wish you knew about working in sports that you didn't when you started?
I would say, I feel like sports, in a good and bad way, it's constantly changing and you're always on the go. It's just being able to go with the flow and, work with the ever-changing landscape. I think, when I first started, it was a little more, basic is the wrong word, but, it was definitely a little simpler then. And, it was almost like I'm very organized and detail-oriented. So, I like when I can just, know I got things done and, prepare for whatever. But what I realize is, as much as you prepare for anything, there's always going to be something that occurs and you kind of have to react on the fly. So I think from that standpoint, it's definitely one of those jobs that you just have to know that nothing is ever going to be 100% perfect. And things will go well, but I think in your head, you're like, okay, well, I did everything. And then something will happen and you're like, wait, I didn't, but I had everything ready for that. It's even little things I remember back when I was a coordinator and we had an open practice in our old practice facility in Waltham, and it was a really bad storm, so all the pipes burst, and there was no water and there's no heat, so then we had to cancel it, but it was an hour before the event was about to start, and just trying to manage that was one of the hardest experiences because I was by myself, and at that point it was just one of those they didn't all have my number. I was just trying to find out, are you supposed to be at the event? Are you, just trying to kind of manage things on the fly. And, so as much as I prepared for that event, I was not prepared for the fact that the pipes were going to burst. And then all of a sudden the event was going to have to be postponed. And I'm kind of dealing with more of a customer service issue and just making sure, the partner's not upset because now we had a massive event at the arena. It's just, as much as your timeline is detail oriented and you're ready to go, everyone has, there's always going to be some hiccup. Someone's going to show up late, or someone's going to say something during a presentation that you weren't ready for. So just understanding that not everything is, going to be perfect. And if you're a perfectionist, you kind of have to learn to let go a little and realize everything won't be perfect, but everything will be perfect enough.
Yeah. That's, I'm sure, great advice for any industry, regardless of sports or not. So for those that may not be Celtics fans or may not follow it as closely as some of us do, you have a game tonight. Celtics are against Portland tonight. So
so every week we kind of have a game night meeting about whatever the week's games are. So we go over all the activation that's going on for that night. So that could be anything from what's going on in arena. So if a partners has a specific on-court promotion, we have to make sure that's all set. If we have hospitality, so when partners are, they have suite nights, or they have what we call a play on the parquet, where they play on the court before the game and then have dinner post game, or post playing on the parquet game, and then go to the game. And then we have to do little things like set up the press conference banner because that's sponsored by Arbella, or and then they have to kind of wait till after the press conference ends to take care of the breakdown of that. So we literally go over, from say 2:00 when the play on the parquet starts till post game when the press conference ends. So we kind of divide and conquer. And at that point where I was talking about it just being like a team effort, that's truly where like it doesn't even matter if that's your partner or not, like you're helping out in whatever possible way. Just every night we have trophy visits, we have legend visits, so everyone, one person's attached to that, and then other times you're escorting a group in because they're watching pregame warmups. So right now, we had a play on the parquet, and then people had special groups come in to do a pregame experience. And then personally, what I most of the time I end up doing is just like suite visits and just making sure everyone's where they need to be. Or if, like I said, you have to learn on the fly, there's going to be hiccups every game night where something happens, there's a ticket issue, they can't get in, it's not scanning right. So you just have to be ready for those phone calls in case that happens. But no game is the same. So there's different partners in different nights. There's different activations going on. So like some days, Mohegan Sun is on the concourse activating, and then other nights, we'll have like the Lucky Dunk show presented by JetBlue. So I think what's cool about it is your accounts, but I think overall it's like some games are busier than others, but you always are going to have action from a partnership side every game. So we're not one of the departments that, they kind of just go to the game and just like they enjoy it. There'll be games where we don't see like a minute of the actual game, as Steve can probably confirm. You're like, we won? Oh, that's great. Because you're busy like behind the scenes, or you're like on the suite level running around with the trophy. Like you just truly have no, formal like, oh, we're just going to watch the first quarter. You're definitely running around, which makes it fun. And I think that's what people may not realize about this parts of the sports industry is, you're not necessarily just taking a break and watching the game while it's happening. You're actually making everything not on the court, but like everything off the court happens. So, there's a lot of action going on during the games, and, tonight is probably a bigger game. So we got switched to national television. So, like little things like that means like we have to cover up all of our partner signage, because that means we can't have it run during national games. So it's just thinking about those little things that can kind of switch things up on you when you're prepared for, a non-national game. So little things like that make a difference in your every game.
Great. Going to go to a student question, and going to pair it with one I was planning to ask anyway. So the student question was, any resume recommendations for someone looking to switch sports, which I presume means working in one sport and then switching over to another sport. And paired with that, I was going to ask, you have been in multiple different sports in your career, and can you talk about how
so I don't think making a switch to different sports
between NFL and NBA
is that big a deal in a sense. I think at the end of the day, the fundamentals of every sports team is the same at every organization. So, every team's going to have a ticketing department. Every team's going to have a community relations department. Every team's going to have a corporate partnerships department. So I think it doesn't really matter what sport it is. I think the only difference is what I find is, some teams focus more on a ticket sales department because they need to sell tickets. Other teams focus more on, like a corporate partnerships department because they own the arena and they have a lot to sell and they need to have a huge activation team because their revenue is so high. So I don't think there's any hesitancy in switching sports, because as long as you have all the basic fundamentals of what your job is and what your duties are, then you should be able to translate that into another sport. You just end up having to learn the new league or the new sport or whatever that may be. There's always new rules that come with everything. So you kind of just have to understand what that might come with. So with that said, I think, when I made the transition from the NBA to the NFL, I found, that what I find is the NBA is more progressive and the NFL isn't as much. So making that transition was a little difficult for me because I had to end up kind of taking a step back because my resources weren't there, because I thought, we were able to kind of get on a different path, but the NFL is a little stricter. I feel like you have more rules and guidelines. And also just being in New York and the NFL offices being in New York, the chance of you getting caught doing like certain sponsorship, like things where they may not be allowed, you have like, if, like I think Spirits company is like a good example where like there's so many rules that come with that I'm almost like, well, so they have a partnership with us, but then we can't, necessarily activate it to its fullest potential because, the NFL kind of steps in and like has their guidelines with that. So I will say the NBA is definitely on a path of just trying to understand and go with the fact that, digital is like a huge part of selling right now, and understanding that, we can have partners attached to things more often, when I think the NFL will take a larger stance on not stopping it, but they're just a little more reserved. And working for the Giants, they're a little more of a reserved organization too. So it was just kind of like that extra layer. You just have to realize, like every organization you work for, there's going to be different rules, I guess. And you're going to have to understand that me working for the Sixers even, and then going to the Celtics, there's different things I have to worry about, even though it's still the NBA at the end of the day.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So another kind of about your current career question.
So when we get
partner
new partners
that
come
brought
in,
on recently that you're
one of the
particularly
things
excited
that
about, and
I have our group, one of our biggest goals is to make sure they actually take advantage of the fact that they're partners with us. I think one of the biggest things is partners don't realize like what it means that you have the right to use our marks and logos. So Coca-Cola is one of our newer partners, and it's great partnering with a brand that kind of understands what their sports partnership means. So they're actually going to take it to the next level versus just utilizing their contract and checking off the boxes. So I think it's cool when the brand actually utilizes our Celtics marks and puts it in the marketplace. Coke signed on, and then they had their entire plan to work with a couple supermarkets to help promote the partnership, and then they created a sweepstakes on top of that to help promote it. And then now our logo is on huge display with Coke bottles at the entrances of a bunch of Shaw's and Star Markets, and I think that really brings it to life and then helps tell the story of, wow, like we started off as partners and now look, like you're everywhere. You're in all these, like coworkers of mine will send photos of it because they went into their like local Shaw's and saw this display. And I think that's pretty cool to showcase, because at the end of the day, like you want to make sure like we get impressions, and like people are gonna draw that association with Coke. Like you're gonna look at that Celtics logo and be like, oh cool, what does this mean? And then you kind of take a step further and they're like, oh cool, like Coke is gonna, like if you just like enter this code in, you could possibly win this Celtics experience. Then now you're like, now Coke is on your mind, and it takes it to that next level. And so that just creates that automatic association, and then it helps us just become more apparent in the marketplace. Because although we're not necessarily like, we're not competing with the other teams in Boston necessarily, but I think it's always nice to be like, oh, we're top in the, we're beating the Patriots, or we're better than the Red Sox. Don't worry. Like, I think it's just, it's nice to kind of have that presence, because Boston is such a huge sports city. And, obviously everyone, if you're from Boston, like you love all the teams, but it's kind of like one of those, we want to dominate the marketplace. And I think that just like is one of the things where I think that's hard to teach a partner who's not necessarily used to kind of taking it to that next level, because they really should have that plan in place almost by the time you guys sign that contract. And you can't really like decide, oh, it's signed, let's think about things that we could do maybe with like retailers or other vendors. So I was super excited about Coke, because then I'm like, okay, they know what they're doing. they've already done this and they work with other sports teams and it's like been successful. So it's cool to just see it happen and bring it to life with us after that.
Awesome. So it's about 6:40, probably time for two more questions. I'll ask one, and then I believe we just got another one.
Sure.
So with Coke or any
even,
partner,
like
how do you guys approach
every partner? I think
return
kind
on
of take
investment,
and take
return on
every
objective for
asset
partners?
and then
What does
kind
that
of
process look like?
individualize what those specific goals are and what their objectives are. So some things are easily measurable, such as TV visible courtside signage, things like that, where we actually work with Nielsen and then they can assign a value to that after we go through all their games throughout the season, and they assign a value to like, this is how much you were able to get out of it. And I think that's probably a little more turnkey, where we can like this is a reputable source, and we're able to realize like, even if national television took away a few of our games where your signage didn't run, but like just knowing the team draws the eyeballs and that's what matters, and you're still getting more impressions than you would even without that game. So for something like courtside signage, that's kind of, from someone who's like looking at straight media, like that's an easy number for them to comprehend. For something like a sweepstakes, some partners want new leads generated, or some partners just want simple impressions. They don't necessarily care for leads. It's not about getting that. It's more just like showcasing their brand. So for a sweepstakes, we actually, take a step back, and before we finalize anything, we make sure that we understand what their end result wants to be. So if they want 1 million impressions, we will find a way to get 1 million impressions and, cater to their needs. So if that's the case for one of the partners, we will then create a promotional plan based on that, and then make sure we hit that number, because it's important for them to like understand that we'll go on the fly. So if we see a trend that's not working currently, like we'll adjust it and make sure that we hit that, because things are ever changing. And like I was talking about, like you just kind of have to go with it. And even if it's like, oh, well, originally we had this plan, it may not be that case. And you have to kind of just like realize, with the partner, that like we're going to always have your best interest in mind, and we're going to take it to that next level no matter what. So that almost to like just trust us and to make sure they realize that. And I think overall, we do a recap at the end of each season. We do mid seasons too, just to kind of check in with partners who have a lot of things that we're able to measure. And just every asset will have its value. And this year we're signing on with more companies that can track now a lot of our social. So it's not just about, how many likes did it get, how many engagements. Now we're able to also track when that partner's signage was seen on ESPN's Instagram, ESPN's website. So it's now getting so intricate, which, when I first started in sponsorship, all we had was like, your courtside signage ran during this time and it was this value, and that was kind of like the thoroughness of it. Now it's like, it was on Bleacher Report, it was on ESPN, it was on Yahoo Sports, and then we can actually assign a value to all of that, which is huge from a partner standpoint, because that's even new to us this year, and we're realizing like, wow, like it's not just about the local TV broadcasts. It's more now about all of social, which is like a huge other animal that has opened up opportunities for corporate sponsorships. But it's something now we can actually show the partner like, hey, look, now that your signage, not only did it run local, like on our local broadcast, on the opposing team's local broadcast, but you're also got all these impressions just from ESPN.
Great. So this will be the final question. Thank you for another student writing this in, and then we'll wrap up. There was a question about, do the Celtics organizations support the National Guard, which I guess I'll expand for your purpose of how do the Celtics
just from a sponsor standpoint, I know
military, how do you work with them?
We personally have opportunities
what programs do you run to support the
I would say like
military?
Pitch and go out to those local, like the National Guard. But I know we have, military night that usually, I think it would normally fall in November. We had it, I think, last month, where, we had like a Seats for Soldiers where season ticket members also can donate their tickets for that game and give it to someone in the military. And then that specific game, we will have, we'll have a theme night of basically everything military, which can be the anthem, the color guard, obviously, and then anything related to in arena we'll have dedicated to that. And I think that's one of the opportunities we have from a sponsorship standpoint to get involved. And then I know our community department just has their own separate initiatives just on supporting that as well.
Well, Vicky, thank you for taking this time, especially on a game night. And thanks for everyone for jumping in. When we wrap up here, my email will be on the screen in case anybody has any specific Celtics partnership questions or anything coming out of this conversation. We've also recorded it, and we'll send out this recording so that folks that may have missed a point or want to go back to a point. Vicky made a lot of great ones tonight, so if you want to look back and get those, we can do that. But again, Vicky, thank you so much, and hope the team takes home a win tonight.